Live everywhere on netrootsradio.com. David Waldman, Kagro, in the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? This is it. This is the end of 2020. It is Thursday, December 31st, 2020. Time for us to give up the ghost finally on this terrible year. We'll wrap up the week. We'll wrap up the year. We'll wrap up the decade. We'll wrap anything you bring us, basically. Plenty of wrapping paper to go around. We have still a lot on hand here and a lot to wrap up. Now, we won't get to all the stories that have been hanging around in pocket for 2020. I thought about that as a possibility for one last 2020 show, just reading off the headlines of everything that didn't get a play on the show, but I don't think that's really going to do us any good. Instead, we'll send you off with a double shot of our favorite guests, or at least some portion of our favorite guests. Some of the others are otherwise engaged. And we don't have room for everybody here today. But anyway, it's Thursday, so we'll be hearing from Greg early on with his roundup of the news as usual, and Ian Reifowitz will join us in the second hour for some discussion of his latest piece on Daily Kos, and always relevant there, but of course really a good, I don't know, maybe we'll call it a good bookend on 2020 and a and a necessary look forward into 2021, the state of the Republican Party, and whether there's any hope for them to undertake the repairs necessary to rejoin mainstream America as one of the two major parties, or whether they'll simply continue to, I hope trail off into irrelevance, but you might have thought that would have happened in 2016 when they realized that Donald Trump was their nominee, but it didn't work out that way. So anyway, we'll check in with him in our second hour, and who knows what we'll shoehorn in between. Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now, reliably informed for the last time in 2020 anyway, from Portland, Maine. Thanks to Bill. Let's see, let's find out what the hell I'm going to do today. Kagro X, me, David Waldman. Bids 2020 a fond. We'll see what happens. Anyway, all right, with guests, of course, Greg Dworkin and Ian, mentioned just moments ago. And to paraphrase the insightful, far-seeing president, we'll see what happens. As I always said, this is just his very eloquent way of reminding us that time is linear, and if we wait around long enough, the things that we were wondering whether or not they would happen will either happen or not, and we will be able to observe that from a third-party perspective. Great. That's so forward-looking. Easy to be the leader of the free world when you simply just say, well, we'll see what happens, whether we lead it or not, and if we do a good job. Lots to round up, as you know, lots of crazy suits still happening out there, people still wondering about what can happen in just a couple of days, and when we come back for live broadcasts next, it will be 2021, and it'll be the 4th of January, and we'll be just days away from the moment at which we find out if truth is to prevail. I guess actually that's the whole question, is whether or not truth is to prevail. But we'll find out exactly how much time people want to waste on the fake stuff, I guess, during the Electoral College count. Still don't see any real path forward for them, but it'll be interesting to see what sorts of things people come up with to say on the fly in what is normally a very heavily scripted exchange on the House floor, and who will go too far in their objections, and how much time will they waste, and can they drag it out until, drumroll, please, January 7th. Now I guess we should add, there's a small cadre of weirdo Republican conspiracy theorists who are running around out there. This is, I guess, just indicative of their weird, distorted ideas about how to interpret the Constitution, that it is mandated, and I guess actually by law rather than by the Constitution, that the Electoral College votes be counted on January 6th, is it? Or maybe the 20th Amendment changed it to and enshrine the January 6th date. I don't know. It doesn't really matter a whole lot because the interpretation they're giving it has nothing to do with anything. But their idea is, well, since it says that the votes will be counted on January 6th, if we stretch things out with enough objections such that even if we lose, the final decision isn't locked in until January 7th, then because the Constitution, or whatever it is they're pointing to, says January 6th, and it didn't happen, didn't finalize on that day, but on the 7th, then that is all now null and void, and Biden isn't the president, and the only thing that could possibly happen if Biden isn't the president, that must mean that Trump gets to continue to be president, which is a total misreading of everything else that's in the Constitution elsewhere. And, of course, I just looked. I didn't see anything about January 6th there, but, it was a quick glance. But even so, the whole point is that the process should begin on January 6th. It says nothing anywhere about what happens if it ends later. So, I don't know. This is just the sort of thing that they believe, and the weird steps that get skipped in their logic, like if I can prove that there was some sort of problem with the voting in XYZ state that Biden won, then if the problem is true, then that automatically means proving that the problem existed means the other guy wins, which of course it doesn't. It certainly didn't work that way in North Carolina in the 9th district race, where the Republican the nominee who allegedly won that race in the general election had cheated in the primary election. They didn't simply say either that the Democrat was now the member of Congress or that the other Republican got to take the nomination and rerun the race or anything like that. They just held another election. I'm sure that I think in the interim, the Trump forces would probably accept as a great idea, the idea of holding another election, and then they would simply do their best to cheat a lot more so that they could actually, quote unquote, win this one. But in the meantime, Donald Trump is a very impatient guy and has decided that he will be the guy who will just say, well, if there were problems, then they just award it to me. It's short-circuiting everything, like with stand your ground legislation. I don't even want to have to defend myself in court in terms of self-defense. I just want to go straight to the win. What was it the other day? We were talking to Armando about something, and I remember what the subject matter was generally, but there was a point at which we talked about the Republican interpretation of the law, that they wouldn't they felt that they shouldn't have to make their case in court. They should just simply proceed directly to a win and a reversal of everything that had happened. And it struck me as very much like the stand your ground laws, although the parallel was a lot clearer then, because Armando was busy talking at the moment, and I remember all right, we'll see if I can't clarify that later on. Anyway, let's see. Lots of other fun things to wrap up. Lots of COVID pandemic news, including the ridiculous news that COVID vaccine is, at least in some places, being sabotaged. That's real interesting. I had seen earlier in the day that a batch of vaccines, Moderna vaccines, had turned up somewhere. As I saw in the headline that I put away, and I'll have to search it out, see if I can compare the stories and see if they're the same one, that some Moderna vaccine had showed up somewhere showing some signs of wastage, that it had not been properly stored at the temperature it needs to be stored at some point during shipping, possibly. And then we later on get this story, which had its own weird twist to it, and it's on the front page of Daily Kos at the moment. Mark Sumner had written it up. Hospital worker in Wisconsin intentionally destroyed 500 doses of COVID-19 vaccine. You've likely seen that story, and I guess as of last night, it was unclear as to exactly why the person had done it, but the early reports were that it had been inadvertent, and then after some investigation, the hospital discovered that this employee who did it said, no, I left it out intentionally, and so they fired him. Whoops, we had Greg, and then we lost Greg. We'll see if we can't get him back. I am asked to rate the quality of this call, so I don't know. we'll give that another shot and connect. But or maybe he went to investigate again. So, which hospital was it that did this? But at any rate, okay, let's see. I think we have Greg back here. Greg, hi, how you doing?
Hi, I have a cold.
Oh,
I don't have COVID. I just have an ordinary cold.
I see. But that's a coronavirus.
Yeah, but it's a rhinovirus probably.
Oh, all right. Well, that's okay. As far as I know, I can't get it over the phone, and there are also several miracle cures. Do you have any? Do you have a fish tank?
No, you know, it's the rocks. Remember the rocks?
Yeah, right.
You put 10 rocks in your pocket, and every day you remove a rock, and when the rocks are gone, you're better. Absolutely guaranteed. Miracle cure. You can buy it right here, along with the gold that we're selling. And let's see, what else? Bleach, and also doomsday prep. You know, we got it all.
Sure. You can plant all the seeds.
We also sell Democratic desks.
Ah.
You know Democratic desks, right? They're the ones you can hide under because you're afraid of what's going to happen.
Right. Good. Okay. Well, I'll take one
Right.
of those.
You know, that comes with a mini fridge and a hot tub. So, you know, it's all good.
Does the fridge go to negative 94 degrees Fahrenheit?
You know, it does now.
Okay. Excellent. I'll take one.
So you want to talk about the
vaccine
rollout? Let's talk about the rollout, then we'll talk about politics.
Sure.
And the rollout is anything but smooth, you know, which gives you the idea that Jared must be in charge of the whole thing.
I guess so. Put $10 in his pocket along with the rocks.
Yeah, so I was putting a piece together, a little thread together this morning on Twitter about how well the rollout's going. I'm going to start with Kaiser Health News, which is Elizabeth Rosenthal. Yeah. Analysis. Some said the vaccine rollout would be a nightmare. They were right.
Oh. Okay.
I mean, it isn't just the story of the intentional stuff. There's already signs that distribution of the COVID vaccines will be messy, confusing, and chaotic. Yes. That's not totally out of the range of normal, but because we've been lied to about everything for so long, there's no tolerance and there's no trust. And that's really a lot of the problem, which you'll see when we get to some of the other stories. But this one starts even before there was a vaccine. Some seasoned doctors and public health experts warned Cassandra Lake that the distribution would be a logistical nightmare. Does that sound familiar? After weeks of the rollout, nightmare sounds like an apt description. Okay. Dozens of states say they didn't receive nearly the number of promised doses. Pfizer says millions of doses sat in its storms because nobody from Trump's Operation Warp Speed task force told them where to ship them.
Right.
And remember, the focus of Warp Speed was to get the vaccines produced, but then they just stopped there, as if somehow producing them would get them in people's arms.
Yes, arms would just show up after hours and pick it up themselves.
That's because they're just stupid.
Oh.
I mean, really, you have to go back. They're just stupid people who are in charge of all of this. A number of states have few sites that can handle the ultra-cold storage required for Pfizer. So, for example, frontline workers in Georgia have had to travel 40 minutes to get a shot. At some hospitals, residents treating COVID patients protested they hadn't received the vaccine, while administrators did, even though they work from home and don't treat patients. That was, I think, at Stanford. The potential for more chaos is high. Dr. Vivek Murthy, named as the next Surgeon General under President-elect Joe Biden, said this week that the Trump administration's prediction that the general population would get the vaccine in April was realistic only if everything went smoothly. He instead predicted wide distribution by summer or fall. Oh. The Trump administration had expressed confidence the rollout would be smooth because it was being overseen by a 4-star general.
Oh, right out of central casting.
But it turns out that getting fuel tanks and tents into war-torn mountainous Afghanistan is in many ways simpler than passing out a vaccine in our privatized, profit-focused, highly fragmented medical system. General Perna, the guy in charge, apologized this week saying he wanted to take personal responsibility. It's really mostly not his fault. Okay. Right? So, not the COVID pandemic. The U.S. healthcare system has shown it's not built for a coordinated pandemic response. We knew this. Yes. We knew that this was going to happen, right? And so basically the whole philosophy from the federal government all along, whether it's PPE or whether it's this, is our job is to get everything together and then we dump it on the states and then it's their problem.
Yeah.
And in fact, that's our philosophy. And everybody arguing that it's a problem is really saying the states aren't doing their job. And so we wash our hands of it. There's no reason for us to do anything extraordinary like a federal response, because it's not our job. And that has been their position on everything forever in this particular administration. and it fails. And now you could see how badly it fails. And this is why, of course, we tear our hair out about two separate things. Amazing we have any hair left. On the one hand, we knew this was coming and they didn't do anything about it. And on the other hand, people voted for these bastards.
Yeah. Right. A lot of them. I don't know if they knew how badly they were going to screw up, although I don't know how you could miss it.
But the unrelated story about a British eel, E-E-L,
yes,
salesperson.
Not an earl, but an eel.
Not an earl, but an eel. Yes. Made his millions selling eels and voted for Brexit.
Oddly.
And it turns out his product can't get through the red tape it takes to get, for example, to France. Or people might eat them, So, with the right sauce. So the idea is, he's sitting there and he's being interviewed and said, "Did you know that this was going to happen?" "Well, I never had any idea. I thought it was going to be a global market. Turns out it's not. If I knew what was going to happen, I never would have voted for Brexit."
Yeah.
And you look at him and say, "You really are a stupid person. Just because you're rich and just because you're good at marketing eels doesn't make you smart."
Congratulations, but yeah. I mean,
everybody told you this is going to happen. Why didn't you listen?
Yeah. I mean, really, I probably would. I mean, I'd be wrong, I guess. Everyone keeps saying he's a rich guy. I'm not certain how rich he is, but he's got something. He's got a business going on, and honestly, I would have said, nobody's going to buy eels. Don't sell eels. I think candy, maybe.
He makes £2 million a year, so it's a lot of money.
Yeah,
the
I wasn't clear whether that was the number of sales.
Will be packaged by the pharmaceutical services provider Catalent in Bloomington, Indiana, and then sent to McKesson, a large pharmaceutical logistics and distribution outfit. I work with McKesson. My office used to get stuff from McKesson.
Oh.
McKesson has a sort of checklist. You go on here, you pick this, you pick this, you pick this, and we'll get it to you as soon as we get it in. And, what if you don't get it in? Well, then you can't have it. Well, what if I want to buy from somebody else? Well, your contract is with McKesson. You can't.
I mean, okay.
So you just have to wait. Well, what if I go on eBay and just buy what I need? If I find out you're doing that, you're fired.
Oh. Okay.
So I didn't tell anybody.
Oh. Yeah. All right. I mean, again, that sounds pretty normal. Were you getting eels?
That's the way things normally.
That's not normal.
And, again, hospital systems, this will come back, as a theme a little bit later. Hospital systems do this. And so you are required to follow their way. Their way is the only way. There's the right way, the wrong way, and our way, So you have things like that. Now, McKesson has offices in places like Memphis, Tennessee, and Louisville, which are near air hubs for FedEx and UPS, and then UPS and FedEx ship them out. So the whole idea, this is all this. You have this piece of it, you have that piece of it, you have this piece of it. If one piece, falls apart, who's responsible? Well, it's that guy. I only do this part. Don't yell at me. It's that guy over there. And so that's part of it. And the idea that the federal government would somehow get involved and coordinate all of this is anathema to these people. But the problem is, if you don't, then you get what we have right now.
Yes.
Right? Like, why isn't there enough toilet paper or Clorox wipes? So, that's the background for a lot of this. Mm-hmm. Matt Smith has that story you were talking about. Advocate Aurora now says an employee at its Grafton hospital intentionally removed the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine from a refrigerator, resulting in nearly 500 doses having to be thrown away. It's actually 57 vials, 10 doses per vial, so that's 570 doses. And he got fired, and they still haven't said why. But an internal memo sent to employees said, "We're more than disappointed that this individual's actions will result in the delay of more than 500 people receiving the vaccine."
Yes.
Okay. This one is from ProPublica. And so just to give you an idea that this problem is everywhere. Rio Grande hospital workers turned down the vaccine. A senator and a sheriff's deputy lined up instead. So many workers at a hospital in Texas' Rio Grande Valley declined the new COVID-19 vaccine.
Really?
The facility offered doses to other medical workers in the region. It turns out the vaccine ended up going to non-medical personnel as well, like sheriff deputies and, legislators who always jump the line when they possibly can and then give you some sort of excuse as to why they did, And so is that surprising? When I was writing about that this morning, one of my Twitter followers, who I often speak to, said, "Why would they turn it down?" And there's a number of reasons you could think of right off the bat. First of all, hospital employees distrust the corporate side. I just told you the McKesson story.
Yes.
So it's on, even if it's just for a nanosecond, then you go on and say, okay, this is a good idea. Hospital employees distrust the corporate side of a hospital system. They're too big. So when the hospital system suits and skirts on the 6th floor says, you have to do this, the automatic response from the employees is, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, interesting, even if they know better.
So you have to think that through and work that through.
Okay.
Now, even for flu shots, for example, every year, it takes work to get people compliant, including the nurses. And I've been there doing the work on that. I know that that's true. You have to negotiate with the union. You have to talk to them about why it's necessary. Because there are people that just don't believe in vaccines. They're vaccine hesitant. They're not anti-vaxxers. You just have to convince them.
Okay.
I know my friend got sick for 2 weeks. And, you can't get sick from this because it's a inactivated virus, or in the case of the mRNA, it's not even the virus. It's just a piece. It's not even a piece. It's the instructions for a piece. So you can't get the virus from the vaccine. It's impossible.
Okay.
But explain that, right? And work it through and negotiate. And third reason why hospital people might not get it automatically is that there's plenty of you go first thinking. This is a new vaccine. You go first. Let's see us, I don't know. Let Mikey eat it. Let's see whether or not he gets sick. And then we'll decide whether, hey, Mikey likes it. Okay. So, I've said for years, the best way to get people to get the vaccine is to tell them they can't have it. And then all of a sudden there's a demand. Right? Yeah. And then, and maybe the most important this year, there's way too much Facebook discussion about this and not enough CDC discussion about this. So people are getting their news from who knows where. The same people like Representative Bob Good, who thinks that the coronavirus is a hoax, but Donald Trump's attempt to prove that he won the election are real. So people have it backwards, and there's a whole bunch of people who are listening to the wrong news from the wrong people who simply don't want to hear the truth. So, and some of them work in hospitals. And so you have a situation where your hospital employees don't automatically line up to get it. The ER people may, but everybody else in the hospital, maybe not.
Okay.
Now, here's another from Chris Hooks. Just talked to a pharmacist in the Panhandle who currently watching 30 doses of the vaccine go bad. He's a Texas guy, Texas Panhandle. Go bad because they can't find enough eligible recipients. We had a year to figure this out. As with every viral tweet, people are taking the wrong message. So let me clarify. It's not the pharmacist's fault. It's the fault of the people who planned or failed to plan for how this was going to work over the last 9 months.
Okay? I think a lot of people are probably surprised by the short shelf life of the vaccine, too. But I guess it was probably all produced with, the idea in mind that people are going to snap this up. We won't have enough.
Well, if it's in the freezer, then you take it out to give people, and then what?
I don't know. And then if
how many times can it be refrozen? We don't know.
Stick whoever walks by, I think. Just jump on them and jab them.
So Ashish Jha, the public health dean at Brown, had a thread the other day. He said a lot of chatter happening on the slow vaccine rollout. And by the way, this is the topic of conversation right now about the pandemic. Not the deaths, not the hospitalizations, but the vaccine botched rollout. That's the discussion right now.
Yeah. All right.
Personally, he says, I'm incredibly frustrated. Did we not know vaccines were coming? Is vaccine administration a surprise? Several complex issues, so let's break things down a bit. Warning, this is a bit of a rant. I love rants, so that's good. First, we were told in October we'd have 100 million doses by the end of December. 100 million. Who said that? Secretary Azar in the Hill 10 weeks ago. Then by November, Azar was saying 40 million doses. And then here's Azar in the Hill saying 40 million by the end of the year. He gives the link. In December, Operation Warp Speed said 20 million doses. And they'll keep the other 20 million in reserve for the second dose. Okay. Now we'll miss the 20 million deadline, but we might be able to get to 20 million by sometime in January. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is no real planning on what happens when vaccines arrive in states. No plan, no money, just hope that states will figure it out. In fact, the plan is blame the states when it doesn't work.
Yes.
That's the plan, because Trump is already implementing that plan. So who manages state level? Departments of health. These well-funded agencies, yes, I'm kidding, who manage all the testing, data analysis, and reporting, providing advice to businesses, schools during public campaigns nonstop for 9 months, they get vaccines. So departments of health are adding vaccines to their plate. Most are super stretched, and they're trying to make a plan. They're trying to stand up a vaccination infrastructure. Congress has given them no money. States are out of money. So many are passing it on to hospitals, nursing homes, counties. You know, county, it's your plan. Counties are passing it along to cities and small towns. Right? The one public health person who administers 3 separate small towns in Connecticut is now responsible for the whole, area.
Right.
Any of this familiar? Like our national testing debacle being repeated. And now hospitals and clinics are scrambling to figure out how to implement this. So there's an article from CNN. U.S. officials promised 20 million vaccinated against coronavirus, but the governments repeatedly promised and didn't deliver. The line when Mississippi health chief says it's not state's job to ensure vaccines get into people's arms. What? Whose job is it? Not the feds. Themselves. They get vaccine to states. Not the states. They just get vaccines to hospitals and clinics. So it's all on the front. It's like your doctor's office. All of a sudden, they're responsible for the pandemic.
The president of the high school French club is going to be fired for this, I'm sure.
Now, to be sure, many states are taking real responsibility, Dr. Jha writes. Lots of overburdened public health folks are still making the work heroically, but that's where we are. Here's a few key data points. We have about 11.5 million doses distributed, 2.1 million given. The real number of given is higher, but it's still not great. But there's no effort from the federal government to fix this. They say it's not their problem. In other countries, they open up stadiums and they have everybody come in. It's a federally administered program. We can do this.
We are a very large country, and I know smaller countries will have an easier time with it, but we just have no infrastructure to say this is where everyone needs to go to get these shots, and then people go there.
You need Joe Biden.
Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Okay, welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All going pretty smoothly, I must say. Greg has a cold, and you're handling it very, very well. So, and then of course, if something happens and you don't, that's okay too, because who cares? You have a
chicken
cold
soup and 10 rocks.
Yeah.
So David M. Perry tweets something which I think is unfortunately going to be true. He's a journalist and historian, and points out that January is going to be the worst month in a century. Right? Because
generally?
all of the December go and visit the family, I don't care what you say, stuff is going to wind up happening. And so we're going to start picking even more hospital issues. Yeah. And then New York City has gotten 385,000 doses of vaccine and distributed 67,000.
That seems
in
like
2
a
weeks.
little.
It takes time to do this, and if it keeps at the current pace, we'll have everybody vaccinated in 10 years.
That's pretty good. By comparison, the small country, as I mentioned, the small countries are having an easier time with it. Israel, apparently, where things are nationalized.
Israel's going to vaccinate the world.
Yeah, well, at least their corner.
They have, they don't.
I don't know how they're doing with Palestinians.
They've gotten all of their vaccine into people. They vaccinated everybody over 60 already.
Yes,
but it's a national program. It's not just
their
that they're
population
small.
a day. Yeah,
it's not just that it's a national program. It's that they're small.
Right,
but there's a national program to do this. It is so important to do this. And so you have states, and we already have seen this, and I get why they do this. The federal government will say, well, we have some advisory guidelines as to how this should be done. Over 75s first, frontline workers. And Florida said, I think we'll just do snowbirds because we need it for the economy.
Right. Or a first come, first serve.
Or first come, first served, as in Lee
County. Right.
That we talked about yesterday on the show. So, and that easily could have been added to the list of things that went wrong during the vaccine rollout for my thread, and maybe I'll do that a little bit later.
Okay.
But nonetheless, it's a bad situation. How do you fix it? You not only get Joe Biden inaugurated, you get yourself a Democratic Congress, including the Senate. So let's turn to Georgia. Some interesting Georgia news here.
All right.
There's, for example, here's some statistics which are eye-opening, and we'll give you the background for the poll results I'm going to give you.
All
right. My buddy Eggy McEggerson, that's his Twitter handle.
Oh, okay.
It's amazing to me that over 100,000 people who didn't vote in the general are showing up in the Senate runoff. This group includes some newly eligible young voters, new residents, but it's also mostly eligible voters who chose not to vote, and a Dem-favorable group. And I think the Mark Elias has won a couple of lawsuits already with Georgia trying to shut these people down and failing. 104,527 people who voted in the runoffs did not vote in the general election. 38% black, 4% Asian, 3% Hispanic. Large and powerful Asian community right in and outside of Atlanta, by the way. And 11% other, mostly minorities, but some white get mixed in too. 30% between 18 and 29 years of age. A very heavily Democratic favored group. And the new Georgia Senator poll out from the Republican pollster, John Kovalan, JMC Analytics, New Georgia Senate poll. In the regular election, Ossoff at 50, Perdue 43, undecided 7. And in the special, Raphael Warnock 53, Loeffler 44, undecided 3%, margin of error plus or minus 4.4. So those are pretty good numbers. And for those of you who are sick and tired of polling, get over it. The Georgia polls are actually pretty good. This is Charles Bethea, who is an Atlanta-based staff writer. I asked the GOP strategist in Georgia what he thought of the new JMC poll showing big leads for Ossoff and Warnock, Ossoff by 7 and Warnock by 9. He said the margins may be off, but I do think the Democrats are going to win. I think the deficit in early voting is too big to overcome, and that gets us to the body of the poll here.
Okay.
Full results. In the Senate runoff race between Ossoff and Perdue, which candidate do you support? 50-43. Only if you're undecided, 7% undecided. Given that you're undecided, which candidate you leaning towards? Ossoff 53, Perdue 45. In the Senate special election between Loeffler and Warnock, 53-44. And if you're undecided, Warnock 54, Loeffler 45. Now here are some interesting other politician stuff here. What's your opinion of the job performance of Brian Kemp? 9% strongly approve, 20% approve, which is 29% approval.
All right.
Disapprove 31, strongly disapprove 26. So that's Trump attacking Kemp.
Okay.
All right. So he's way underwater in terms of approval. What is your opinion of the job performance of Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger? Remember, Brian Kemp is extremely partisan and has no goodwill.
Yes.
Raffensperger is a partisan Republican, but basically plays the job straight when he does it. Strongly approve 15%, approve 32. So those are pretty good numbers. That's 47% approval. Disapprove 20, strongly disapprove 15. So 47-35 approve. No opinion 17%.
What does his brother say?
Okay, and of course his brother, he does have a brother, it's just not the brother that Trump is citing.
Okay,
Trump is citing Brad Raffensperger's brother as being associated with China, but it's not his brother.
Oh.
So how likely are you to vote in the January 5th runoff election? Plan to or already early voted in person, 75%. This is the key number here, okay? Plan to or already early voted by mail, 16%.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Plan to vote on election day, 7%.
Wow.
Okay, so the point is, the Democrats, we know, are doing very well in the early voting. The Democratic counties are up, the Republican counties are down, and within this poll, as we'll see, white voters in these suburban counties are trending Democrat. So
that's good too.
Ossoff and Warnock are not only cleaning it up with non-white voters, they're also doing reasonably well with white voters. We'll get to that in a minute. But the point is, the whole strategy is just like it was in November. Run up a big lead, like you did in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, and then withstand the onslaught of Republicans on Election Day. Except that,
yes,
okay, only 7% they're planning to vote on Election Day.
Not much
So if you run
onslaught.
up a big lead and most of the vote is early, it's going to be more like Nevada than it is going to be like Georgia was in November.
Yeah.
So those are really strong numbers for Democrats. It doesn't guarantee a win. That's not what I'm saying. Polls don't do that. But I'm telling you that there was an interview in the New York Times, which I think summarized it really well. They asked the Democratic strategist in Georgia, what do you think of these numbers here? And he said, well, let me put it this way. The light side of the moon looks great. We can't see the dark side. Okay. We don't know what's going to happen on Election Day. But I'll tell you this, he said. In 2018, the light side sucked.
All right.
So it's looking good for the numbers we know, and then there's numbers we don't know. This poll says 7% show up on Election Day. Probably going to be closer to 20%, says the pollster. How do I know? I asked him. But I asked him directly. And so he said he's estimating 20, 30% will show up despite what the poll said. But the poll does say that most people are actually planning on voting early. And what if he's right? What if these numbers are actually close to, what it is? Then it's a blowout.
Yes.
It won't be a blowout, but I'm saying.
All right.
Now, he writes, the pollster, given that the poll numbers in both U.S. Senate races are almost identical, there's some common threads that can be discussed. One, both Raphael Warnock and Jon Ossoff have nearly unanimous black support. Two, both Democrats have double-digit leads among those with a racial classification of other, which includes Asians and Hispanics. And three, both Democrats are garnering the support of 1/3 of white respondents.
Okay.
Right? It's usually 30% rule. You got to get at least 30% of whites.
All right.
In some cases, 40%, depending upon what the mix is in your particular state.
Okay.
Jon Ossoff is getting 40% of the white vote in Cobb and Gwinnett counties. 43% support Warnock, while in the core counties of Clayton, DeKalb, and Fulton, both Ossoff and Warnock are getting 55% of the white vote. Even in the Central and South Georgia media markets, 33% of white voters are supporting Warnock and 36% are supporting Ossoff. So what should be concerning to both Republican Senate candidates is that Democrats have built up a massive lead from those voting or planning to vote before Election Day. Mail-in voters are 67-31 Ossoff and 69-29 for Warnock, and advance voters are 55-44 and 55-45. So these numbers mean that even though the poll numbers show massive Perdue-Loeffler leads among Election Day voters, they'll need that vote to be substantially more robust than it was in November, when only 20% of the electorate voted on Election Day.
Oh, yeah, all right.
Right? So the fact that most people are saying they're going to vote early is not surprising. That's what happened in November.
All right, then we should be prepared for it.
I don't have at my fingertips. Amanda would probably know this, but I don't know this. What percentage of voters voted on Election Day in Florida? But I'm saying, even without looking, this doesn't look like Florida.
Yeah. And they don't count like Florida either. It's interesting. So the strategy is build up a massive lead ahead of Election Day and then count that lead last. So, all right. We'll be in for the same thing, although it'll be real interesting if it was really something like 7% of people voting on Election Day, or even if it's 20%. I think at this point, having seen, what happened in other states in particular, but even if you didn't, it would be difficult, not that he wouldn't try anyway, for Trump or the Republican candidates to start claiming victory on election night based on the returns when people look and see, all right, well, Ossoff, or rather, I guess we'll say the Republicans will be claiming the lead. So Perdue and or Loeffler are saying, I won with 52% of the vote. Or maybe because of the voting day characteristics, larger, 57% of the vote. And then the little numbers underneath that say it's 11 people voted in the whole state. But, that's probably a valid result, and we should all just accept that. We know that several million ballots were cast, but these 11 looking really good.
Right. So You still have Trump attacking Brian Kemp even as of yesterday.
Yes.
For example,
resign.
He wanted Kemp to resign. That's exactly right.
Did it work?
So he's going to have a rally the day before the election. Biden's going to have a rally in Atlanta. Trump's going to have a rally somewhere else in Georgia. And Trump is still really, 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 really mad at Kemp. They've been feuding for a while now. And how Trump handles that is going to be key. He could stick to the script, which I think will still wind up with Republicans not being terribly helped by it.
Yeah.
But what everybody's going to watching for is, will he attack Loeffler and Perdue for not being insufficiently loyal?
Yeah.
And if he does that, he'll doom them. So in other words, he could really hurt, and it's unlikely to help if he goes down there and does the rally. Yeah. So you don't need to hide under your Democratic desk, for right now on this election. It's close. Nobody's predicting a win, but that's what the numbers are looking like.
All right. Get out from under the desk.
This is a race we can win, is what I'm trying to say. It's not one that we're doomed to lose because we always lose. That's not what's going on here.
No. People like to point to that. They say they hate to point to that, but they like to point to that. And, it's historically been a different situation. And in that different situation, different things happen. Okay. So I'm willing to accept that. It'll be really interesting to see what Trump does. I think that we were wondering the other day whether he would try to sneak in a round of golf before heading to Georgia for the rally. And then if he did, would he be so fatigued that he would resist the instructions to stay on script? But apparently he's flying back to Washington early, leaving Mar-a-Lago early. And I don't know whether it's part of the strategy to rest him up and keep him off the golf course, or it's just strategy of just the optics of keeping him off the golf course while the vaccine rollout fails. Or I saw reporting this morning that he's so excited, he's so personally energized and excited by the prospect of people doing dumb stuff on January 6th that he wants to get back and start plotting it. I'm not sure which of the various dumb explanations it is that has said,
if you want dumb,
bring him back.
Armando was talking yesterday about dumb Louis Gohmert.
Yeah.
But how about dumb Lynn Wood, who I think is a Georgia attorney, if I'm not mistaken?
Yes, he is. A famous guy.
A couple of more questions for Chief Justice John Roberts, he tweeted yesterday.
Yeah, what?
You were recorded discussing Justice Scalia's successor before date of his sudden death. How did you know Scalia was going to die?
That's not the same thing. But okay.
You bought life insurance. How did you know eventually you would die? How did you know that? Right. Number 2, are you a member of any club or cabal requiring minor children as initiation fee? That's minor, M-I-N-O-R, not M-I-N-E-R. He's not talking about West Virginia constituency here.
I see. No.
That would be my answer. Right out of QAnon.
Yeah, I mean, that's crazy.
Right out of Pizzagate.
I don't know what. I mean, does he? I don't know whether he imagines that in court he could elicit an answer of.
What do you imagine?
Well, what do you? Depends what you mean by club.
As John Arabosis points out here, this is a pro-Trump lawyer suggesting the Supreme Court Justice John Roberts had advanced knowledge that Scalia would die, and that Roberts is a pedophile who uses minors as currency. Again, minors, M-I-N-O-R, minor children.
Yeah.
Not coal miners.
Right. Though it is what the coal miners wanted.
Right.
But, I did some odd questions, certainly, and clearly indicative of his having been immersed in QAnon style.
But this is the Georgia Republican Party, is what I'm trying to tell you.
Yeah, although I will say I've seen so much from people I don't particularly trust, but a lot of mainline and plenty racist and jerky Republicans saying Lynn Wood is a Democratic plant, you see.
Well, he'd have to be because he's so nutty.
Right.
But no, that's not how it works.
Okay. Eric Erickson is fairly certain that Lynn Wood
Eric Erickson is fairly certain that Republican pollsters are telling him that the Republicans are going to win. I just gave you the data from a Republican pollster. Yeah. And a Republican analyst down there who said no. So Eric Erickson is not exactly your reliable source here.
I will write that down. Eric Erickson, not good. All right. I had that.
Eric Erickson wrote earlier in the week, increasingly confident of a Republican win, talking to Republican pollsters. He must be talking about Insider Advantage in Trafalgar. Those are the Republican pollsters that are polling Georgia, finding that the Republicans have like a 1-point lead. But Survey USA and JMC Analytics not finding that at all.
Right.
So we'll see. It's less than a week. Again, polls are polls. Everybody knows what to make of them. But the data underlying it, looking at the number of people who are voting early versus those who plan to vote on Election Day, not good for Republicans. They have an enormous hill to get over if they're going to win.
Okay, and they don't like walking or exercise as it is, so getting over a hill, not on their agenda.
Right.
Okay.
Okie dokie. So anyway, that's pretty much what I got today.
Oh, all right. Well, that's a good amount of things, I guess. Ruining the vaccine and prolonging the pandemic.
Yeah,
and losing in Georgia.
Got anything else here? Oh, I got
Not
this
us,
one. This is
no.
nice.
Okay.
All right. Frank Bowman. Who's Frank Bowman? Frank Bowman is a lawyer. He's a law professor, criminal lawyer, legal historian. Okay. And he writes, my God, talking about Josh Hawley, and Josh Hawley saying, I will contest the vote.
Yeah. All right.
My God, Josh, I've known pretty much what you are since you took office across hall at MU Law, but I had no idea how low you would be prepared to go in pursuit of power. You call yourself a constitutional lawyer, but you disgrace the profession and dishonor Constitution daily. So that's a law professor and former colleague of Josh Hawley at the University of Missouri.
Should have done something. Should have pennied his office door shut or something.
So just wanted to remind you that Josh Hawley will not allow Tommy Tuberville to outflank him.
Yeah. Well, that would be pretty embarrassing if the football coach showed up and got Mr. Constitutional Lawyer, yada, yada, caught unawares. But, yeah, I'm not 100% certain what Hawley is actually thinking in there, and I'm certain he's looking for some strategic advantage. But he's kind of hedging where he says, well, people believe this and they need somebody to speak up for them. And
well,
that's
Rachel
not the same
Burkow,
thing as
who
saying,
is
I believe
NYU
it.
law professor and faculty director of the Center of the Administration of Criminal Law, author of Prisoners of Politics, says Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz are in an epic battle to see which one does more to shatter the myth that a Supreme Court clerkship is a sign of somebody's intelligence and good judgment.
Yeah, okay.
Right, good point there. Well, I clerked for the Supreme Court, therefore you should trust me. What are you talking about?
Well,
the answer to that is Ted Cruz. What are you kidding?
Yeah. I predicted that they were going
Ted
to
Cruz
lose
and
their
Josh Hawley?
We'll see how it goes and whether they elbow one another aside. It's going to be like a competition well, I guess you sign it ahead of time. And so all that really is going to happen is somebody is going to be asked if their complaint is in writing and if it's signed by a senator, and they'll say yes. And I don't know if you'll see Cruz or Hawley get a chance to speak in the exciting part of the proceedings.
Twitter doesn't show up, tweets don't show up terribly well on Skype, so I'm going to send you these last ones on the DM later so you can actually read them on Twitter. Okay. But this is, because I collected some Hawley quotes here. This is Adam Kinzinger, who is actually a Republican representative. So he tweets, internal monologue for Josh Hawley. I want to be president, so I decided to try to get POTUS tweets saying I'm great, even though I know this isn't going anywhere. But hey, I'll blame somebody else when it fails, end quote. Yes. That's what Hawley's thinking, according to Adam Kinzinger. So he's not exactly making friends with fellow Republicans. And it's pretty amazing. And then the last one is going back to Donald Trump. The consent decree signed by the secretary, with scare quotes around secretary, talking about Georgia, with the consent of Kemp, is perhaps even more poorly negotiated than the deal that John Kerry made with Iran. Now it turns out that Brad Raffensperger's brother works for China, and they definitely don't want Trump. Also scare quotes around Trump. So disgusting, MAGA. And Rosenberg points out, a lot of people have noted that Georgia's Secretary of State doesn't even have a brother who works for China. They're missing the real story, which is that the president is a credulous idiot.
Yeah, I mean, just also, get a new line. What, John Kerry, Iran, what? I mean, I know what he's talking about, but...
so we'll see what happens. If that's the theme of his rally, good luck.
Yeah, the real laugh line there.
Okay, that's it for me.
Okay.
I'll see you on Monday.
Yes.
Right? You're doing a recorded show tomorrow?
Yeah. I don't know what the hell's going on tomorrow. I'm guessing
you're not going to be live.
Yeah. It won't be me waking up early to talk to everybody. That's I don't think is going to happen. No.
All right. Well, just talk in your sleep and record
All right.
it. It'll...
Yeah, the family has to hear this stuff anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Take care, and I'll talk to you on Monday.
Very good. We'll do that. And
yesterday was fun. I'm glad Armando was on. I like arguing. Well, we weren't really arguing. I was startled. He wasn't even wrong.
No.
He was wrong maybe about one thing.
Oh, well, all right then. What was it?
And I was thinking about this and talking with some other people about this. He was making the case that he, as a media lawyer who successfully won cases before there was Section 230, minimized a bit the effect of Section 230 repeal, I thought, based on what he was saying. That there's other ways you can get to the same place.
I see.
But the problem with that requires deep pockets. In other words, you can hire Armando to get you out of the hole there.
Yeah.
But what about like the little bloggers who don't have those kind of resources, who have communities, who have online communities, and use Section 30 as an easy leave me alone way out of complaints about the comments? That's what happens now.
Okay.
Somebody makes a comment on a little guy's blog, and somebody else said, I'm going to sue you over that. And, well, Section 230 says you can't, so don't even bother.
Okay, I see.
Without that, then you have to hire Armando to go win the case, which he would. But it's a whole lot more trouble. And that means that if you're a little guy blogging, you say, well, why should I even have comments? It's just not worth it.
Okay.
So there's a bit of a chilling effect of not having 230, even if eventually you still win, because it's just so much more hassle. 230 is just like an easy protection wall.
Yeah, I get it now. Sure. But that reminds me, that's what I was thinking of earlier in the show, that was the parallel to the stand your ground laws, that these things are short-circuiting provisions that simply establish as a matter of law that you don't actually have to show up and defend yourself. And in the same way, you don't have to go before a jury and say, I was acting in self-defense. You just aren't troubled from the beginning. So the mechanism is similar. But this is a good point that it's perhaps only the case that absent Section 230, deep-pocketed big tech firms will be able to protect themselves and others might not be able to afford to do so. It is interesting, though, that Trump refers to Section 230 as this big sop to big tech as opposed to... Well,
big tech is the least troubled by losing it. It's the little guys that I think that'll be hurt.
Yeah, okay. Well, we may get a chance to see.
I mean, I remember years ago, 10 years ago maybe now, I started a flu wiki.
Yes.
With a conversation about people who wanted to prepare for the eventual flu pandemic we knew was coming.
Right.
Without a thought about, what happens if I get sued over what the comments are.
Yeah, that's the
Would
way
I
most
do that
people
now? I don't think so.
Huh. Yeah, well, you would at least have the thought.
I would have the thought, but, it would then check with a lawyer and, make sure this and that are all lined up. Whereas in those days, you just got on, you said stuff.
Yeah.
And you had other people say stuff.
Yeah.
And so the idea that, now you're going to be subject to what those folks are all saying, and you can't control what they say.
Right.
You can't moderate everything when it's even a reasonably moderate-sized community. You can't. So, I would never put myself in that situation these days.
Yeah.
Which is a shame because it was a really useful resource. So I'm just saying.
I get it. That's a good point. I'm glad you remembered to sneak it in here. Armando, you're totally wrong. There you go.
No, he's not totally wrong. It's just,
Armando,
there's just unintended
wrong.
Consequences and things that happen that are different depending upon where you are on the food chain.
Yeah. True. And that's a pervasive problem. In all areas, where you are in the food chain determines your substantive rights at law. That's bad news.
Right.
That's something we got to fix.
So, there you have it. Anyway,
Okay,
that takes you to
take
the hour. I thought I was done, but I guess I'm not.
Right.
See you Monday.
Okay. All right.
That
Thanks
happens
very
every
much.
time.
I'm glad you reminded me of that thought that I was searching for that earlier today, so it works out very nicely. Okay.
Terrific.
We'll catch
All right,
you
but
then
it was an
in the
interesting
next year.
discussion, and as I said, I'm really glad Armando was on. Take
Yes,
care. Bye.
Me too. All right. take care of yourself. In fact, actually do take care of yourself and get rid of that cold. We're not quite up to the hour yet, but that's fine. We can sneak in a few stories before the 10 o'clock hour turns over. And then, of course, time for a visit from Ian Reifowitz, which just reinforces my major theme for the day. I don't have to do very much, and that's a good thing. Let's see. I will sneak this in since we talked a little bit about the coronavirus vaccine and the distribution issues. Saw a story the other day in The Hill that sparked a minor outrage, I think, on Twitter about congressional staff now being eligible to receive the COVID-19 vaccine. We, of course, heard a lot of backlash about members of Congress jumping the line, etc., and getting their vaccines. I just wanted to throw out one possible explanation for it, and it's derived from the story we read on the air the other day about the complications that COVID could present for the vote for Speaker on January 3rd, that the rules permitting remote voting and remote participation by members of Congress are good only for the current Congress, as all House rules are, and need to be renewed in order to continue to allow it. But in order to renew it, they're going to have to get together in person in order to adopt the new rule that says from this point forward in this Congress, we can vote remotely. So that makes the January 3rd session a potential super spreader event, which the danger of which would be lessened considerably if members of Congress and top staffers who are likely to be on hand for these proceedings are all vaccinated or in large part vaccinated. It actually is one of those things that if you sit back and think about it, it makes sense, and then you say, the optics of it are terrible, but I think scientifically this makes the most sense. It's not necessarily the outrage we thought it was. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. And as I prepare to dive into the second hour, it occurs to me that my usual discussion ahead of these things with Ian is about the mechanics of it and about whether he wants me to give him a call or he wants to give me a call when he's set. And I realized, hey, we didn't have that conversation this time. And I realized that in the middle of the shorter of the two breaks. So that's not so great. Anyway, I will attempt to coordinate that. And basically, we'll just say, why don't we figure that if in the next minute or two, we can set things up. We can just give Ian a call, and I think he'll probably be ready. And as a matter of fact, he's probably listening and give me a sort of a digital thumbs up at any point. Then I'll know everything is cool. There it is. It's already there, as a matter of fact, at 9:58, heading into the break. Ready when you are, so well done there, Ian. Shall we say we're ready? I think so. Just one more thing, I guess, before we jump into that. I think we snuck in the last comment there about the idea of vaccinating the top staffers. This is an issue everywhere in terms of who we're vaccinating on priority basis and who we're not. But I guess also if people are actually out there refusing the vaccine, I'm for sticking it into the arm of anybody who'll take it at this point. But anyway, I just thought that was something that needed to be said. I think I saw, is it Pete Souza, the former White House photographer under the Obama administration? I saw questioning this idea of distributing the vaccine down to the level of staffers in Congress. But again, the virus doesn't care what body it's in as a host, whether they're a staffer or a very important member of Congress. If they all have to be kind of concentrated and in the same place, and even if they're masked, it's not really a great thing. 435 people packed into this room. It's a big room, but there isn't enough space for 6 feet for everybody. And yeah, they kind of all do have to be there. They could come up with some logistics for staggering attendance in the hall of the House, such that those all the how they go in alphabetically, all A members of Congress, or A through A and B members in your last name, because they call the roll by in alphabetical order, and then you could rotate people in and out. But I don't know how well that works, and I don't know how well it works for Capitol Police officers or staffers from the Sergeant at Arms office stopping members of Congress at the door and saying, Mr. Gomert, we're on the B's now. You don't get to enter the hall. Or some of the new QAnon loony weirdos who say they're going to be carrying guns during all this. Can you bar them from the floor without danger to yourself and others? I don't know. It would be kind of a logistical nightmare, and people would definitely be out of compliance, some of them by accident and some of them on purpose. And, the more elegant solution, if less popular, is probably, if we were vaccinating these people a week or more ahead of the voting, which is no longer the case. But back when they initially announced it, perhaps they could still sneak it in. If everybody was vaccinated, hopefully, if things go right with the vaccine and they haven't been left out of the refrigerator, the chances of transmission among the people who had to be there for at least this one day would be considerably less. And so maybe, when we really get down to it, it all makes sense. So, okay. I thought that was worth pointing out. And there are a couple other vaccine stories in circulation. But I think we'll leave it there. And let me give a call to Ian. As I'm scrolling up to get ready to do that, I do see there was also... I did, in fact, find that there was a second story about the Moderna vaccine being damaged by lack of refrigeration. The intentional sabotaging of the 57 vials of vaccine was a Wisconsin story. It is a story from out of Texas, reported by Bloomberg, that notes the other thing. Moderna temperature snag delayed 144,000 Moderna shots bound for Texas is the headline over at Bloomberg. I'll give you that to read up on. So Moderna, even with the less stringent requirements that for temperature, for refrigeration, still running into these problems. Okay, so a gigantic issue with the rollout. Now I gotta find my way over to, there we are, Ian's up here. Let's give him a call and get started, shall we? I'm predicting that we shall. But okay. All right. This worked very well. Good morning, Ian. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you, Dave?
Okay. Getting ready for the new year by sitting here and doing nothing. But next year I plan to do some things that we couldn't do this year. So, that's good news. I'm looking forward to that.
You should be. I'm looking forward to the same.
Okay. Very good. I think I've wrapped up all of the super pressing vaccine stories that I wanted to bring up today. Still a major topic, of course, that and the various stupid reactions to the ongoing pandemic. But there's a different kind of stupid reaction that among the ranks of Republicans that we're going to focus on for the next hour. Your latest piece, which you shared with me a couple of days. Actually, I got an exclusive preview. It wasn't that exclusive, but it was a good preview nonetheless. You're an egalitarian when it comes to previews, I am sure. But your piece here, after 50 years of riding waves of hate, the GOP must finally decide if Trumpism is its future, is the title of the piece. And I think, a at least rhetorical question on everybody's mind. Can they do it? Who would do it even if they could? So, this is a wide-ranging topic, and I'm just going to launch into it. There's no segue from coronavirus, really, into this. But although I did note in the article that you do say that this theme of setting themselves up as anti-science is not new and not exclusive to Trump, and something that we've seen before in this 50-year continuing transition, I guess, into this I don't know. I mean, eventually do we land on the QAnon party kind of thing or what? And I guess that's an open question for the future too. How far does their hate take them? So,
well, I knew you'd find a segue. So
okay, how's that then? I was searching around for one under the desk, groping for it, and I got it in the end.
Well, look, I mean, the Republican Party look, any day is a day. Any day is a good day to change one's direction, right? But I think clearly, President Trump is offering Republicans an obvious chance at an inflection point, should they want to take it. And when we say they, obviously, it's not a yes or no. Will the Republican Party take it? Republican Party is made up of individual people, so it's a matter of how many individual people take it, how willing they are to fight to change it. What I argue, in the bulk of the piece is historical, to say that Trumpism, in quotation marks, is much larger than Donald Trump, and it began long before Donald Trump was even out of school. And that what we now recognize as Trumpism is really just, another form of extremism. And that Republican extremism, in terms of their rhetoric as well as policy, really goes back to everything else in the modern Republican Party, and that's Reagan. And it's not Reagan in 1980, but it's Reagan in the 60s. I mean, after 1964, when you had the first Republican presidential nominee, we're talking about Barry Goldwater, to come out against civil rights, he got trounced. Republicans decided, rather than take that as a sign of where they should go, they doubled down, and Goldwater began the process of bringing white Southerners into the party. But he didn't engage in what I would call direct race-baiting rhetoric. Just he came out with a racist policy. I'm against the Civil Rights Act. But then Reagan, starting in the 66 governor's race, race baited in ways that we see now with Trump, and obviously came long before Trump. He talked about crime, in California, in the 60s.
Yes.
He talked about when the sun goes down, the city streets become, quote, jungle. Our city streets are jungle paths after dark. I mean, we know what that means. This is, even more so maybe 50 years ago, people talked about Black Americans and evoked images of the jungle in Africa. I mean, really disgusting stuff. And that's clearly what Reagan is doing. And he's doing this as he's talking about law and order, which is one of Trump's favorite, themes.
Sure.
He also came out strongly against anti-discrimination laws at the national level, but also in California, talking about how there was a law that banned discrimination in housing and in renting properties. Reagan came out against that. What did he say? Well, he said, I'm not a racist, of course, but
sure.
But I'd oppose the Rumford Fair Housing Act. Why? Well, he says, well, if an individual wants to discriminate against Negroes, and that was the language of the day. That's 1965. Discriminate against Negroes in the sale of or renting of his property. It is his right to do so. And he said, the law that he was opposed to, this Rumford Fair Housing Act, would, quote, give one segment of our population a right at the expense of the basic rights of all our citizens. The idea that being free from discrimination, that African Americans being free from discrimination was somehow discriminating against whites is it's there. It's there with Reagan in 1966. It's not something that starts with Trump. It doesn't even start with Nixon and his use of the Southern strategy 2 years later. So I'll run through some other historical developments. Reagan in 1980, talking about states' rights in Neshoba County, Mississippi, which you may be familiar with, the county where the three civil rights workers were murdered, trying to register black voters. I talked about Willie Horton. I go through some of these things. But the point is, Trumpism predates Trump, and it isn't just on race. To get back to the vaccine, we talked about science. The Republican Party on science has been anti-science for decades. The most obvious example issue is climate change. And it doesn't just start with Trump. Even though there were elements of the Republican Party, including John McCain in 2008, who were very reasonable on climate, John Huntsman in 2011 warned that the Republican Party was becoming, quote, the anti-science party. And this is a real thing. So one of the lines I liked in my post, if I do say so myself, is I said it's only a short step from climate denialism to Trump bleating about injecting bleach and taking hydroxychloroquine to cure COVID, as well as spouting "I don't agree" with the Center for Disease Control's prevention on message on masks when he claimed that face coverings, quote, cause problems too, end quote. I mean, this is where republicanism is today. And so. Yeah. Is there a possibility for them to change? Yeah, I think you've got some people in there who have spoken out against Trumpism, not sometimes on the elections, but on other things. Mitt Romney has, on occasion done a nice job. He certainly stood up for American democracy when he voted to convict and remove Donald Trump from office. That's a big deal, right? First senator ever to vote to convict the president of his own party. I mean, ever. It's a big deal.
Okay.
There are others. Liz Cheney has spoken out against not just elections, but Trumpism on other occasions, and there are other people as well. We need these people to step up. There needs to be a fight within the Republican Party, and if Trump runs again in 2024, I don't see anybody who has been around. Anybody who was in the 2016 race, none of them are going to be able to run again because they're all tainted. They've all sucked up to Trump since then, including Rubio, even though once in a while he says something, whatever. But Rubio, forget him. Kasich, he didn't do very well last time, and now he just endorsed Joe Biden. He can't go ahead and run in a Republican primary. So if Trump runs again, I am very concerned that there's just no way that the party is going to change. Now, what would have to happen at that point is you'd need a breakaway. You'd need people, the never Trumpers would have to leave the Republican Party and run and get somebody on the ballot in 50 states and take 10 or 15% out of Trump's hide and ensure a landslide for the Democrats, but presumably would be Biden. I mean, if you want to get speculative, and it's we have an hour, why not get speculative? Sure. I think the only person who even stands a chance to challenge Trump for the nomination if Trump runs again is Romney. And I don't think he would stand a great chance, but he was the Republican nominee before. Tens of millions of people have a muscle memory of having voted for Romney in a Republican primary and at the presidential level.
There's some people with tattoos.
Yeah, exactly. He never really kowtowed in the way that the others did to Trump. And so I think he could make a stand for a different kind of Republican Party. Not that Republican Party was so great, but it was a Republican Party. I don't want to say a Republican Party. It was a kind of Republican candidate who, for the most part, stayed away from race baiting. For the most part, was reasonable on science. Was just wrong on economic issues, wrong on reproductive rights, wrong on plenty of other issues. But not somebody whose value system is a direct, the same kind of direct threat to democracy and Enlightenment values, and frankly, racial equality that Trumpism, going back to Reagan in '66, represents. So that's the thrust of the piece.
Yeah, and now a good point, I guess, in reminding us exactly what Reagan was all about in his way. It tends to get either forgotten or glossed over, and part of that is probably intentional and on the part of people who might say run to take the reins of leadership in the Republican Party and lead them away from Trumpism, but who will still make a point of go out of their way to identify Ronald Reagan as a hero of theirs, which is interesting given that what we're learning or remembering in some cases about what Ronald Reagan was really about. After all, I think I guess that's also the importance you bring up right up at the top of the piece, the fact that this is it a mini series that's about the Reagans, and I know I've seen it advertised and discussed, but I haven't actually sat down to watch it, or even I don't know if I even it says here, is it on Showtime? Is that where it aired? Because I didn't even get to the stage where I identify it for sitting down and watching it, but I guess this is a good opportunity if it's available for us to watch now. A good reminder not everybody has this same memory of Ronald Reagan, or some people who do view it as a different phase in his career, which they somehow might have convinced themselves that he left behind in running for president in 1980, though he ran on pretty much that platform once before and threatened to do so even earlier. So the transition period of Reaganism isn't even all that clear.
Right. There's no transition. Yeah. I mean, he goes from that jungle paths in 66 to 1976, his campaign for the Republican nomination, where he's talking about, using some really disgusting rhetoric about welfare queens and what he refers to as strapping young bucks, which is a very old-fashioned racist phrase that maybe isn't in common use in 2020, but in the 70s it was still there. David Duke was using it. He's talking about, there's this great, he really combines race and class resentment brilliantly, to give him credit, I guess you could say. He talks about how, while there's a strapping young buck who bought a T-bone steak with his food stamps, right? And how frustrating that must be for you to see that happening while you're waiting in line to buy hamburger, right? You're buying hamburger with your hard-earned money, and some strapping young buck is buying a fancy cut of steak. I mean, you really want to get people angry and ready to enact their revenge on black people. Well, Reagan's telling you, I understand, I'm with you. So this is 76.
Wow.
And there's some other great stuff in here that from the Reagans. How he privately, he publicly never actually uses racial, he gives himself an out, well, I didn't say this was a black young buck, whatever, but I'm not a racist. You never heard me say anything racist, Well, then there's the video, the audio from the Nixon White House, where he is talking with Nixon about, I think it was Tanzanian diplomats, right, who were doing a celebratory dance at the United Nations after a particular vote. Reagan said, quote, "To see those monkeys from those African countries, damn them, they're still uncomfortable wearing shoes." I mean, again, this is very old-fashioned stuff. I don't think people, maybe we've become more sophisticated in our racism today, but then it was a lot of sort of, primitive, Africa, whatever, has something to do with African Americans. Anyway, obviously, somebody who would say this is clearly somebody who harbors significant prejudice in their minds.
Yeah. Although, right. I mean, now you make me think of Trump and his comments about, other countries and what he thinks of them.
Exactly. I mean, this is where republicanism is. I always think back to the, I think it was actually Janine Garofalo who said on MSNBC a long time ago. She said, not every Republican is a racist, but all the racists are Republicans. And yes, we can talk about white liberal racism, blah, 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 blah. But no, if you're a virulent racist, you're not a Democrat. I'm sorry, you're not a liberal. You're of any kind of significant, in every kind of significant way. You're not a member of the Democratic movement. You're not a member of the progressive movement. If you are a hardcore racist, you're going to be a Republican, or you're not, or you're going to be apolitical.
Yeah.
At best. But Reagan brings these people out. Reagan brings out this vote. You don't see, Joe Biden. Look at what Joe Biden did in terms of talking about Trump's racism, and look at Trump's racism. I mean, it's clear to see where Trump is coming from, and all of these things. And you and I have talked about this. We've talked about Professor Ian Haney Lopez. He's a source on the Reagans. He's, they do a number of interviews. Clearly did some long interviews with him and intersperse his comments. That this is how Republicans, from Reagan to Nixon to Trump and on all the way down the line, use racist rhetoric to get working class, middle class white voters who are not going to benefit for much, if at all, from tax cuts to the billionaires and millionaires, to vote for a party whose main task is to cut taxes for millionaires and billionaires, and they use this race baiting to pull the wool over those people's eyes. I mean, look at what the Trump administration accomplished. The only major legislative accomplishment of the Trump administration was the rich man's tax cut of 2017. And that's where people thought, that's not, people who are voting for Trump to help them, they didn't get much help. I still remember seeing this polling that showed that going into the election, Trump was seen as more moderate than any of the previous Republican nominees going back decades. Reagan, I don't know if it went back to Reagan, but Romney, McCain, Bush. Trump was seen as more moderate, and he did talk about things like, "Oh, I'm going to protect Medicare and Medicaid," or "I'm going to." He expressed openness to raising taxes on millionaires and billionaires. What did he do in office? The opposite. Yeah. The opposite.
He's done nothing in terms of delivering any of the help that he claimed to be offering on a class base rather than on a race basis. But I think he put about 17 different people in charge, quote unquote, in charge of the opioid crisis, as one after the other either failed to deliver anything. Although I think their instructions were, I want you to go and take over this, and fail to deliver something, which is easy enough to do. But that, and bringing back coal, and opening steel plants and car manufacturing plants, none of which ever happened, all the way up to that point during at which time he was still paying attention to the pandemic, promising everybody either speedy delivery of a vaccine or free Regeneron monoclonal antibody therapy like he got for free when he went to Walter Reed. That's really, that's stuck in my craw the last couple of months. Remind everybody every day how many people have died waiting for him to come through on his promise of this miracle cure that he personally experienced and benefited from. And he'll share it with all Americans because he's fighting for all of us. It's not even a race-based claim for him. And still, it was all nonsense from the beginning, and he had never had any intention of delivering. And, I don't know. No surprise, I guess, certainly. But it's part of this question, this larger question that you pose of whether or not Republicans will disavow Trumpism. There's a race-based component, but there's also, and as you mentioned, the anti-science component. Maybe that helps us in the transition we can get to after the break, is there's just this anti-truth, or at least truth is not a thing that should matter to a politician working in the Trumpist Republican Party. And that's going to take some training to get people away from, too. I suppose you could be not particularly racist or even be anti-racist and still be anti-truth and anti-science, and just simply say anything that gets me in trouble didn't happen or is fake news, and when convenient, vice versa. So there's a lot of things you need to separate yourself from if you want to reverse the fortunes of and the future of the Republican Party. And I don't know if there's anybody that's suited to take the reins of leadership that can actually effectively address all of them. That's troubling.
Very troubling.
All right. Wow. Well, let's see. We have a minute or two before our break comes in, so I don't know if we can launch any new and major themes, but do you happen to know is the Reagans, is this series still streaming anywhere or available for those of us who are off today?
Tomorrow? If you have Showtime, they keep all their stuff in the library. Anything that they air stays in their library for a couple of months. So if you have Showtime, you can get it there. They had on Showtime.com, they were streaming at least one of the episodes free. I don't know if they're still doing that. But yeah, but you make a good point about the truth. That was one of the other things that Trump has picked up from Reagan and especially from Nixon. Undermining the media. I mentioned how this is something that Nixon did systematically. Not so much Reagan, but attack the media, working the refs. Talking about truth, and how basically, if you can destroy the media's ability to convince people that facts are facts, then you can do anything you want. And I was reading today, Eric Alterman had his last piece in The Nation, and I really like Eric Alterman, and he quoted from Hannah Arendt. We can leave with that quote. She said in 1974, quote, "If everybody always lies to you, the consequence is not that you believe the lies, but rather that nobody believes anything any longer. And a people that can no longer believe anything cannot make up its mind. It is deprived not only of its capacity to act, but also of its capacity to think and to judge." And that's where Nixon and Trump want to take us.
Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Ian Reifowitz is still with us, and I hope you had caught the previous segment. If not, go back and get the podcast, because speaking of his latest piece that's been published over at Daily Kos, very important, I think, and we might be able, I'll have to check out myself whether or not I can find the series on the Reagans and whether they're streaming one of the episodes for free, as might have been the case at some point at Showtime.com, just to get a good flavor for what his origins were and what it was really like and what he was really like. Because sometimes, especially for younger voters, it's one of those safe rote answers for Republican candidates to give when they ask, the sometimes very dumb question you see in debates, or who are some of your political heroes of the past. And Ronald Reagan is an automatic, easy answer for Republicans, and for a while was even actually an automatic, easy answer for Democrats to give, especially if they were directly asked, well, what about someone from the other party? Who do you admire from the other party? And I guess the lasting image, the media image of Ronald Reagan was of the smiling, optimistic, upbeat president who I think he really was served in many ways more than we may have recognized as a role model for Trump, in the sense of, it just occurred to me as I was saying this, when Trump was saying he was downplaying the virus because he wanted to be a cheerleader for America, sort of reminded me of, I think, the way most people still think of Ronald Reagan, the president, as if not particularly competent necessarily, then at least a upbeat and optimistic cheerleader for America, because he smiled as he stabbed us. And I think that's all it was. It's just, he was an actor, and it makes sense that he would be able to pull that off somehow. But yeah, pretty important. And if you don't have a good sense of Reagan's background, whether you were just young when he was president, or even when he was governor, or weren't even born, probably a good refresher for those who were around, and a great learning experience for those who were not. So I thank you for putting that together. And we can make a transition, certainly. The floor is open to you. We can, of course, continue discussing that, but I'm sure there's much more on your mind as well. I'm sure everyone's preoccupied with events in Congress, the race in Georgia, the pandemic. What else is capturing your interest and attention this morning?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, there's a lot going on. We're heading into the last weekend before probably the most important and impactful, God, I hate that word, runoff elections in terms of governance that I can ever remember. I mean, I can't ever remember a special election runoff in January that could determine control of the United States Senate and could give one party, possibly having a majority of at least, however slim, in both houses of Congress and the White House.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't get much bigger than that for a special election in January.
True.
Trump, I think, helped Democrats with this $2,000 stimulus business. You now have a clear split between Trump and McConnell.
Yeah.
Loeffler and Perdue don't know where to go. Their heads are spinning. They're saying, well, I'm for Trump. But I think it was Ossoff, or maybe it was Warnock, or maybe both of them were saying, listen, this whole $2,000 business shows you how important it is which party controls the Senate.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what Perdue and Loeffler say. McConnell controls the Senate. The $2,000 doesn't come up for a vote.
Yeah.
So that's a powerful, and I hope it's not one that I'm just making by myself. I'm pretty sure I saw them making it. I'm not that clever.
No, I think everyone has.
Here's a powerful argument against the sort of default that people, at least middle of the road or right of center people might say, well, I'd rather have a check against Biden. Well, here's a positive counter to that. If you like the $2,000 stimulus payment, which 80% of people apparently polling like it, from what I read, you better give the Democrats the Senate majority. And there's a reason, because the reflex would be just let's make sure Biden doesn't go too far. We'll vote for the Republican. That's where a lot of middle of the roaders or not that political people might go. Polling is what polling is. You can't tell anything about who's going to win, right, from a poll. But you can look at polling averages, and I don't want to dig too deep here. I'm no Nate Silver, but you can look at polling averages. That's helpful. The polls in Georgia were among the most accurate nationally in 2020.
Oh.
The polling average, the final polling average, had Biden with a lead of about 1 point. He won by under 1 point, but it doesn't get much better than that, being within a point of the average. And I think more important than anything else is sort of the trend line when you look at one polling outfit polling multiple times. And that, I think, you've got reason to think that Democrats have at least a 50-50 chance of winning there. Yes, I mean, you've got this, one outfit, Trafalgar Group, which is a Republican polling outfit. And I'm not so interested in their numbers specifically as their trend. In early December, they showed Ossoff with a 3-point lead. They didn't poll the other race for some reason. Then in mid-December, they showed Perdue with a 3-point lead. But in the last week of December, they showed Ossoff again with a 3-point lead. Not again with a 3-point lead, but up to a 3-point lead. So that's an apples to apples comparison. Polling showing that maybe the race swung a little bit towards the Republicans in the middle of December, but in late December it swung back harder to the Democrats. There are a couple of other pollsters that polled more than once. Survey USA, which has an A rating, in late November, they had Ossoff with a 1-point lead. Oh, I'm sorry. The Trafalgar Group also did both races, and they also showed a similar trend. The Trafalgar Group had Loeffler with a 3-point lead in early December, and then a 7-point lead in mid-December, but then down to a 4-point lead in late December. So again, the trend is there. The Survey USA had Ossoff with a 2-point lead and Warnock with a 7-point lead around Thanksgiving. And then the most recent poll from USA Today had Ossoff with a 5-point lead, so up 3 more than prior, and Warnock with a 7-point lead, so holding. So again, there's more than one repeat pollster showing the race improving for the Democrats. Whether it's improving from them being down 5 to down 2, I can't tell you, but the trend is in the right direction. So that's something. And I do think this $2,000 business is helping. It gives the Democrats a strong argument to make. It throws Republicans off their game. They don't know if they really like Trump. Does that mean they should be voting for Loeffler and Perdue or against Loeffler and Perdue? Because Trump seems to be on the opposite side of McConnell, at least. So anything like that helps Democrats, without any question.
Yes, true. And I even see Newt Gingrich out there tweeting that the resistance to the $2,000 checks has been an enormous strategic mistake for Republicans, and everybody knows it. And, he may or may not still have a finger on the pulse of Georgia politics, but it does seem to make a certain amount of logical sense. I think lots of people want that help and could use that help, and I think they're irritated by even if they're fiscal conservatives, they're somewhat irritated by these pronouncements, particularly from people in Congress who are themselves very wealthy, saying, I'm for helping people, but I'm very worried that $2,000 could go to somebody who only kind of sort of needs it, or maybe doesn't need it at all. And then if you try and pin them down on who doesn't need it, they very often will, pick an income bracket where people are like, it's been kind of a hard time, this pandemic, and I didn't lose my job, but it has not been easy to maintain things, or a lot of people who've been helping relatives and friends and neighbors get through it if they did lose their jobs, who could use that boost. And nobody, turns their nose up at $2,000 in tough times. So it's an extraordinary thing to sit there as a member of Congress or posing as a economic theorist, saying my real worry here is that somebody who might not need the money might get the money. And then the weird proclamations too, that from some Republicans saying, well, people will only spend it at Walmart or Amazon. Like, what? Why? What happened here? I'm not certain what prompted you to say that, but isn't that kind of what you want to have happen? Have you asked Walmart what they think about that? It's tied them all in knots. They don't know what to do and how to oppose this thing, because I guess the specter of having Trump nominally on the other side is spooking them, but they've been trained to oppose this thing for so long, this sort of thing, that they just don't know what to do. And I guess anything that throws a wrench like that into the works in the closing days of this consequential runoff elections has got to be good.
Right, and especially because Republicans are more likely to vote on the day of the election. Mm-hmm. Anything that, it really helps to have that happening now. And I may have sort of buried the lead a little bit, which is that polling average shows Ossoff ahead by 1 point and Warnock ahead by 1.9 points. Mm-hmm. So I think at worst, we've got a 50-50 shot, is my guess.
Yes, I'm sure.
And look, you can make arguments on policy, and I don't want to just say, all that matters is whether we win or not. Although really, all that matters is whether we win or not.
I think you're right.
But on policy, yes, does it? $2,000 for a 2-adult household is $4,000, and another $2,000 per child for a family that's earning, let's say, $130,000 and hasn't lost their jobs. Yeah, it makes less sense to me, frankly, as a progressive than let's say increasing the unemployment payments to people who have lost their jobs. But that's not where we're at. And Trump, this is a self-made mess by Trump. But yeah, on policy grounds, I would rather see more targeted money going to, increase, let's say, food stamps, money to, if it was even possible, if I was drawing up things, help people pay for their rent who are unemployed, on increased unemployment. But that's not where we're at. That's a policy discussion, and I don't have the power to affect policy. But in terms of politics, I don't think there's any question. If Newt Gingrich is saying it's hurting Republicans, it's probably hurting Republicans.
Yeah, he may be right there. And there are certainly better policy proposals to make, but none that have the ability to pass in the closing days of this Congress. And in this unusual situation with these two runoffs pending. And certainly there's a separate question of politics. But yeah, even on a policy grounds, if you're offered a gift like that from Trump and can take it both for the politics and the imperfect policy, you grab it.
Right. So. And even better is that it allows Ossoff and Warnock to say, look, Republicans in the Senate voted for this BS tax cut that Trump passed in 2017, which went overwhelmingly to millionaires and billionaires, and you weren't worried about money going to people who didn't need it then. So how come you're worried now about money going to people making $50,000 and $60,000 and $70,000? That shows you everything you need to know about who who you're for. Loeffler, I don't think was in Congress yet when that passed, but Perdue definitely was. Mm-hmm. The bill passed in December of 2017, and Loeffler got into Congress a little tiny bit after that. I want to get you a date. I want us to be accurate here.
Sure.
But she has been the senator. She only came in 2020 , I guess. But Perdue was there.
Feels like longer.
Yeah, Perdue was there. I mean, and the Republicans were there. I mean, that's sure. That was their tax cut. And so, how are you going to say that you're worried about middle class people getting money, but not worried about giving money away to millionaires? I mean, right. It's exactly where Democrats want to be in terms of talking about issues before an election. Anytime Democrats are talking about economic issues and economic populism and helping, tax cuts for the rich versus helping the middle class, that's where Democrats win. It's not just that it's, to quote Bill Clinton, it's not just the economy stupid. It's that it's economic policy stupid, right? When Republicans are talking about defund the police, Democrats are going to lose. But when Democrats are able to talk about money for the middle class versus money for the wealthy, Republicans are going to lose.
Yeah, and you couldn't ask for a better combination of sitting Republican senators to have this conversation. Just Kelly Loeffler in particular. Is there a problem with people who don't need additional money getting additional money by either with imperfect policy or by insider trading, for instance?
But hey, she wears a baseball cap.
Yes. Right, and owns a basketball team.
That's right. And David Perdue, I mean, he's basically a day trader. I mean, if you look at his stock records.
Yeah.
I mean, my God.
That's crazy.
These two are perfect poster children for a Republican Party whose interests only serve the economic elite. And that's the argument that we want to be making. That's the argument that we need to be making. And then the flip is again, Biden out there saying, contrasting the problems that we're having with the vaccine rollout, which goes to Trump's competence.
Yes.
And he doesn't even have to say, give me senators so that I can do more. But he clearly is going to be able to do more if you give him senators. And his competence versus Trump's competence is clearly a major issue. I think it's one of the issues why across the country Biden ran a bit stronger than sort of the generic Democrat in the House and Senate races, is because he was running against Trump. Trump lagged, to get political sciencey on you. Trump lagged the Republican candidates for the House and Senate in general because he was Trump.
Yes.
And they weren't.
Interesting. And a reverse coattails situation. And for a guy who, I think if you ask Trump, for whatever value you might get out of asking him any questions about what he thought about what the dynamic was, and I guess he still believes, and that's why he's going down there for their rally on Saturday. He still believes that he's a guy with tremendous and powerful coattails, that he calls the shots and the winners in these races around the country. And it was the opposite. But again, Trump just denying the obvious reality of things and insisting that he's the guy that's pulling the Republican Party along.
Hey, I'll gas up the plane for him. Get on down there.
Yeah. Well, we are gassing up the plane that he's using, of course, and he's using it now. I understand he's going to leave Mar-a-Lago, or has left perhaps already today, is flying back to Washington and then back down to Georgia. Now, he was almost there. It would have been a short hop, might have been even a helicopter ride for him from Mar-a-Lago to whatever destination he was going to hit for his rally in Georgia. But now he'll be wasting that much more time and money to go back and forth. Everyone's speculating. Do you have a guess as to what might have motivated him to go back to Washington? I think I've seen everything under the sun so far, and I guess now the hot new speculation is that he'd be going back to participate in some sort of military planning on a possible military action against Iran on his way out the door in the final days of his presidency, which is also, I think, something people have guessed at for a long time, and I don't know whether there's any truth to it or not, but you might as well enter your guess in the sweepstakes as to what's sending him back to Washington if you have any ideas.
Huh. Well, I mean, I did hear that he doesn't like what Melania did to the place down in Mar-a-Lago.
Yes.
So they want to get out of there a little sooner. I was just thinking to go,
funny.
to touch back to our Men of a Certain Age theme, that There certainly is a joke about the devil went down to Georgia here with Trump heading down there. But I really, really, really like the fact that Biden and Harris are going there again and putting the hammer down. I remember, there were other examples. Granted, they weren't as important, and maybe the Democrats calculated that they had no chance. But there was a special election. I want to say right after Obama was elected, there was a runoff in January, similar, because of the 50%. The need to get 50% in November. There was a runoff in Georgia, and Obama didn't go anywhere near it because he didn't want to go down there and then have the Democrat lose, which is what they expected to happen. But I love the fact that Biden and Harris are putting some political capital on the line. I think it's great to see that. They know how important this race is. Biden ran stronger than Ossoff, who was the only one between Ossoff and Warnock was the only one really with a head-to-head race in November. And so Biden is going to put his capital to use, and so is Kamala Harris. And they've got juice, between the two of them. They are a powerful, hopefully powerful vote-getting machine. They certainly proved that they were, powerful vote-getting machine enough to win by 7 million, which is nothing to sneeze at in terms of national popular vote. And like we said, they did well in Georgia. Obviously, they won Georgia. I mean,
they should be going back.
They should be going back. Exactly. And I like that. I like that. I like that it's Democrats on offense. The whole narrative of the 2020 election changes if Democrats win one or especially both of those Georgia races, because the narrative is, Trump lost, but Republicans did pretty well in the House, and the Democrats couldn't take the Senate, and blah blah blah. If Democrats take the Senate, the whole narrative of the 2020 election is, I would argue, changes. And it is important. Look, I'm a historian. If Democrats don't win both of those seats, Joe Biden becomes the first Democratic president since 1885 to come into the White House without at least majority control of the House and the Senate. Every Democratic president since then has come into the White House with the majority of the House and the Senate in Democratic hands. I mean, granted, it shouldn't be that surprising given Democrats control the House for so many decades in the middle of the 20th century. But we don't want Joe Biden to be the first one since Grover Cleveland of anything.
True. Well, that's that would be problematic in any context, probably, because it would just demonstrate, that's outside of the norms at the very least. It would be enormously helpful. And of course, this particular brand of Republican that sits at the moment in control of the Senate is extraordinarily dangerous. It probably was something that people didn't necessarily notice in the same way in the intervening years between Grover Cleveland and now, because there was this, at least for most of these years, the sense that the Republicans would govern as as they said, as a loyal opposition, and that might make things more difficult to do. Between today's hyper-partisanship and, of course, the increased and more partisan use of procedure like the filibuster in the Senate, you can, we watched Mitch McConnell do it the first time around with Obama, insisting that it would be his job not to govern the country, but to make sure that it was ungovernable enough for Obama that he would be a one-term president. That, I think, too, was probably the first time that happened, maybe since Grover Cleveland or before. It just wasn't a normal use of the Senate. No. I mean, look, the Senate is imbalanced. We need to do things like bring in Washington, D.C. as a state. We need to, if Puerto Rico has, in which they had a referendum, actually, if Puerto Rico formally requested it, we need to bring Puerto Rico in as a state. That would certainly help redress the balance of the Senate. It could, yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, we know what we need to do. The Electoral College is ridiculous. I mean, the fact is that if Joe Biden won by 7 million votes, he won by 4.4% of the popular vote. But if you shifted 1% of the popular vote across the board in every state, right, and Biden would still have won by about 5.5 million in the popular vote, and he still would have won by 3.4% of the popular vote. 3.4% of the popular vote. But if you shifted 1%. Yeah. That would have been enough to swing Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Well, no, Pennsylvania 1.2%. Fine.
Okay.
So shift 1.3% of the popular vote to Donald Trump, and he wins the Electoral College. Even though Biden would still have won the popular vote by 3%, 1 more percent than Hillary Clinton, and would have still won the popular vote by 5 million raw votes, at least, 2 million more than Hillary Clinton. That's crazy. That's crazy. I remember reading something that really scared the hell out of me before the election. I think it was on 538 that it said it showed the percentage likelihood of Biden winning the Electoral College based on what percentage he won the popular vote by. And it was, if Biden won the popular vote by 1%, Trump was an overwhelming favorite to win in the Electoral College. Yeah. I mean, isn't that crazy? And if Biden won the popular vote by 2%, Trump was still a solid favorite to win in the Electoral College. Biden had to win by 3%, just to have a 50-50 chance of winning in the Electoral College. Think about how many presidential elections have been closer than 3%. If you're going to give one party all the elections where they lost by 3% or less in the popular vote, how many elections would you flip? And that's crazy. You'd flip 76. You'd flip, you'd flip 68, I guess, if you want to give it to the loser. You'd flip 60. I mean, you can go on and on and on. That's crazy. Yeah. I mean, I guess if one party needs only 47% of the vote to win and the other party needs, that's not how it's supposed to work, David.
That's true. And it's come up a lot lately, but only because we've seen, I don't know, we've just managed to dodge that bullet enough times that we didn't pay attention to it, even though previously there were enormous constitutional crises over that very question, but then after a while there wasn't.
Right. I mean, bringing in D.C. and Puerto Rico wouldn't move that enough Electoral College votes to take care of that. You want to call it a sweet spot or sour spot for Republicans, where they can lose by 0 to 2 or 3%. Trump eked that out last time, but he eked it out with an Electoral College vote margin of 74 electoral votes. So you have to flip enough states to flip 37 electoral votes. You're not going to get that with D.C. and Puerto Rico. That's true. You're not even going to get that with the thing I would argue for, which is D.C., Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Virgin Islands. Puerto Rico maybe would have 4 or 5 electoral votes, and the others would have 3. So you're still only talking about enough to offset Michigan. But you're going to lose Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Georgia, Arizona. You're going to lose all those states if you win the popular vote by 1 or 2 or possibly 3 points. And that's not how elections are supposed to work. The losers aren't supposed to win.
Yeah. Well, I wonder how much attention that will get. I mean, the Republicans have been able to just simply dismiss that as crazy because it's counter-constitutional, which is kind of an argument that people actually listen to. But come January 6th, when they start to pull all these stunts and insist that the Constitution is what, not only enables them to do this, but mandates that they do it. As Josh Hawley now saying, I have to speak up for people who have this belief that the election was somehow rigged or fraudulent or didn't come out the way they like. But January 6th, it's going to be all over the television that the Electoral College is not only every bit the disaster Democrats have told you it is and could be and will continue to be in the future unless we do something about it, but even Republicans are making a mockery of it right in front of you. They're saying you can send in fake certificates and just pretend those are the ones, and that we should really be recognizing that. It should be really interesting if we ever, maybe this is the time to pounce on it and should be part of the Democratic agenda to say we absolutely must address Electoral College reform now and in this new Congress, whether we win in Georgia or not. It's got to be addressed. Even the Republicans you just watched, even they don't believe that this thing makes any sense, and we're making a mockery of it just yesterday. They said they were defending it because they think the founders designed this brilliant system. We know what they really like it for, but did anybody watching on January 6th see any Republicans respecting the Electoral College process? I didn't. So, yeah, maybe we have that opportunity now. Thanks for joining us for that second segment, that wider-ranging segment. It's always good to have your opinion and weighing in on the subjects of the day. Thanks for giving us your time today.
Always a pleasure, David. Happy New Year to you.
Thank you, and to you as well. Stay safe. Hope you can stay away from the COVID and maybe get your name on the list for the vaccine in 2021. If we're here reading 2022, waiting for the vaccine, we're going to have problems. Okay, take care, Ian. We'll see you again sometime in the next year, and appreciate it again. Thanks, and everyone, for your sticking with us throughout the year. And of course, Justice Putnam comes up next with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy to give you, I guess, his last licks at 2020. Stay tuned after this to find out a little bit about what's coming up.
From networksradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, what could possibly be on tap in the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy that we didn't get to today? Well, I'm sure there'll be some focus on the failures of the rollout of the coronavirus vaccine, to be sure. And in international news, guess what? Trouble arising in the UN over Trump's pardon of the Blackwater criminals.